Coming up today, a brother and sister both needing brand new hearts. What it was like sharing this transplant journey and how family history may have played a role. Good morning. It is Tuesday, February 28th. I'm Jessica Lovell, and welcome to the Morning Medical Update. You are about to meet siblings Corey and Christina. They are close. They still enjoy a little sibling rivalry and poke some fun at each other. But when not one of them, but both of them needed a new heart, the fun stopped and both went into survival mode. Corey Cleaver is in his element, guiding these veterans on a pheasant hunt. But it's been a long road.
The biggest change is the ability to breathe.
A decade of heart issues that started in his 30s left Corey often so sick he couldn't move from the couch for days. Doctors diagnosed him with non-ischemic cardiomyopathy, a heart condition that led to a heart transplant in 2019 when we first met Corey.
Somebody had to lose their life so I could keep mine. I don't look at it like it's somebody else's heart, it's our heart. I just got repowered, basically.
2019 is when we also met Corey's big sister, who shares a bond with her brother no one would want. Christina also needed a heart. She was diagnosed with the same heart problem. A left ventricle assist device known as an LVAD kept her alive.
You don't have a quality of life, you just have a life.
It was June 2020, in the middle of the pandemic, when Christina got the call from the University of Kansas Health System's Center for Transplantation.
I remember asking her, I was like, are you sure you want to do it now?
It was never even a thought to me. It was just like, they have a heart, I've been on an LVAD, I'm ready to go.
While Corey had a better bounce back, Christina's road to recovery was quite different.
Corey got through it like a rock star, though. I mean, he was done in 15 days out of the hospital. I was in the ICU 23 days on ECMO, 32 days in rehab. I mean, it was bad.
Christina survived and is now thriving, back to work where she and her co-workers recently honored her donor.
Everybody read their card, right?
Both Christina and Corey now have a better understanding of the heart disease that runs in their family. It claimed the life of their father at a young age. Their cardiologist, Dr. Hirik Shah, explains.
For heart disease, mostly it's what we call autosomal dominant, which means they only need one gene, either from mom or dad, to be abnormal for them to develop the disease. And so there's a 50% chance of inheriting an abnormal gene if that gene does exist. It's a great story. You have two family members that are afflicted with the same disease that end up needing the same therapies and then get them to a point where now they can live normal lives.
The siblings' outlook on life now is simple.
You could hardly function some days. And then to go from that to what we're doing now, mind-blowing.
When you spend 10 to 15 years with a debilitating heart disease and then you get a second chance, you don't slow down. You don't waste any more time.
And they are wasting no time. Christina and Corey, good morning to both of you. How are you?
Good morning.
Morning.
Good to see you. You look fantastic. We're going to talk with you in just a moment. Also want to introduce here in the Dolph C. Simons Jr. Family Broadcast Studio is Dr. Hirik Shah, Corey and Christina's cardiologist. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me. Good to see you guys, Christine and Corey.
It's always nice to see people kind of come through their health journey like that, you know,
Yeah.
and then back to life.
It's definitely good to see people outside the hospital and and living normal lives. That's the goal.
That's always the goal. So I want to ask you both, Christina, I'll just start with you. What was it like going through something like this together? I mean, a lot of family members go through it alone. You have support, but you're going through this particular feeling alone. But to know that you and Corey literally felt the same all the time, what was it like?
It was pretty scary. Corey's always got to be first. So he was about 6 months ahead of me as far as when he got his LVAD, and, you know, he got sicker faster than I did. And so I kind of got to watch what he was going through first, and then I got to go second. Sometimes I didn't do it as good as Corey. So it seemed like his road was a little easier in the beginning, and then he got sick, and then once he was so sick that he had to have the LVAD, I started to get sicker and knew that it was coming for me too. So it was kind of scary to watch him go through what he was going through, and then know I'm next.
Yeah, that I was going to say that when I first talked to you several years back, it was watching Corey, and I know how devastating that was for you to watch him so sick. That's one feeling, and then the feeling knowing that it's coming for you.
Right.
So I want to ask Corey, when did you first realize something was wrong with you physically to where you sought help?
That would have been in probably March of 2004. I couldn't lay down to sleep. When I would try to sleep, it felt like I was drowning. It felt like somebody was sitting on my chest. I ended up going to a doctor, and they tested me for allergies and told me that at the age of 25 that I had allergies, and they put me on prednisone, which still didn't really help. And then finally, after the meds didn't work, it was around December, they finally did a chest X-ray on me and didn't like what they seen, and I was admitted right there and diagnosed with dilated cardiomyopathy and spent the next 3 weeks in the hospital.
So what was the treatment like? Go ahead.
The treatment initially, after they did their first initial catheterizations and stuff like that, they tried to do it with medicine. I was still relatively young. There was talks of, getting on the transplant list. At the time, I was up in Iowa, so I did some work with the University of Iowa up there on my heart condition then. But for as long as we could, we handled it with medicine, and then once the medicine quit working, then we had to go mechanical or electrical or bionic, whatever you want to call it. So.
Well, let's talk about the LVAD. You both were on LVAD, left ventricular assist device, to bridge you to a new heart when you found out you were going to need a new heart. Dr. Shaw, I want to bring you in. Is an LVAD the only path to transplant for patients who are as sick as Corey and Christina were?
When it comes to transplant, there's a few different options. You can go directly to transplant. Sometimes we put patients on temporary mechanical pumps, but the LVAD is a durable, pump that people can go home with. And at our program, what we've been very successful in is if a patient comes in very, very sick, we try to stabilize them with a mechanical pump because we can implant that, today or tomorrow. The heart transplant list is, a little bit higher risk because you have to wait for the right donor, you have to wait for the right match, and some patients may be too sick to wait that long. And so what the LVAD allows us to do is implant them, stabilize them, have them go home, get stronger. So when they eventually get a heart transplant, their outcome could be better.
And I remember talking with Christina. You had a tough time on the LVAD. You were not feeling great when we first met you. You had a lot of things to say about the old LVAD. Is it normal for somebody to, are they still not feeling well on it? Or is it, again, just meant to keep them alive until we can find them a heart, or are they supposed to be actually feeling better on it?
Well, we hope that they, feel better, but sometimes heart conditions, you have two sides of the heart. You have the right side and the left side, and the LVAD is a left ventricular assist device. So it only really helps the left side. And so there's one side of the heart that's not really being assisted by the LVAD, and so patients can still have heart failure symptoms. They can still have issues with getting short of breath when they walk around, or not feeling 100%. It is better than some of the medicines that we have, like the inotropes that we talk about. But in the end, transplant, in my opinion, is still the gold standard to treat end-stage heart disease, and the LVAD for both of these patients, for Christina and Corey, were the bridge to an eventual heart transplant.
And Christina, I know you said you had no hesitation getting the transplant because that would get you off the LVAD, right?
It's hard to live with the LVAD too.
Yeah, it's hard. Tell me about that. What's it like? I want to hear from both you. Christina, what was it like living on the LVAD?
I had a really hard time with the LVAD. I mean, granted, it helped, but I was extremely sick. I was nauseous for over 3 months of it just because of the force of the blood flow and everything like that. And it's hard to live with it. You have to be very cautious of what you're doing. You have to be ready that if something starts to alarm, you know what to do. You know how to switch your controllers out. You're limited, but in the stage I was before the LVAD, I was extremely limited, so I didn't really have a choice.
Corey, what was it like for you?
When I got mine, I mean, I was very. There was two paths. It was that or death, and I was near the latter when they got it put in me. I got it in March, and I didn't make it home until Memorial Weekend, so in May. And as soon as I got home, I was ready to be home. I was out digging in the dirt, planting my garden, and messing around. But those stupid batteries in that pack that they made, that wasn't conducive to my lifestyle. So my mom sewed me a shirt where I could tuck the batteries inside, and then wear a T-shirt over it, so all my parts and pieces would quit falling out, and I wasn't dragging wires and cords and everything. But it's very hard to live when you got an extension cord hanging out of you, especially if you're an active person and you're outside. There is an older gentleman here that is a neighboring farmer that is in his, I think Bill's almost 80 now, and he got the LVAD when he was 73. So he didn't have the option for a transplant, and he's still going. I can't believe he's had that LVAD for almost 10 years now, and I gave him my old shirts because he was still on that after I got my transplant. But it's not for an active person or someone that wants to be active. It's a very hard device to live with. But we overcome and we adapt. I ended up still, even with the LVAD, I was out driving tractors and doing different things. I just had to be very careful because of the heparin and the blood thinners and stuff you're on, not to injure myself. But I made it through. So
yeah, it was
11 months. 11 months. Yeah, 11 months with that wonderful device, and I still have it. It's buried in my backyard. They let me bring it home, and I buried that damn thing in the backyard so I could pee on it every day.
You always tell it like it is, Corey. I appreciate your honesty, and that's totally fine. You've earned it. When we come back, I want to ask Dr. Shaw something, but I want to hear about the night that you got the call, Corey, to get that your heart came in. I always think that's a fun story, so hold on one second. But Dr. Shaw, seems natural to see the family connection of heart troubles here. Both siblings needed transplants and kind of went through the same thing. Is it just a coincidence a brother and sister both needed a transplant, or clearly is there something different when we know that they've lost their father?
Unfortunately, not a coincidence. I think this is one of the new frontiers in our field, is looking at the idea of a lot of heart failure, a lot of what we call cardiomyopathy, disease of the heart muscle, can be genetic in nature. Some studies say up to 40%. And we are learning a lot more about the genetics of heart failure. And now we have very good assays to test for genes to see if there is a genetic component that could impact the cardiac muscle, the cardiac structure. And so what we're finding is that, a lot of patients do have genetic underpinnings of what their heart failure is, and it has a lot of implications. One, for the patient themselves, certain genetic conditions are a little bit more malignant than others, and then also for family. So then if someone is afflicted with heart failure and has a genetic condition, they can then have all their family members test for that same gene, and then we can watch those patients if they test gene positive, a little bit differently if if another family member tests gene negative.
So, Corey, tell me about your first date.
So Super Bowl Sunday of 2019, I invited a gal out to partake in the festivities at the Super Bowl. It was a beautiful day here. It was like almost 70 degrees, and I was standing at the grill, grilling some burgers and some jalapeno poppers. And she had been there for approximately 17 minutes, and the phone rang, and it was Joey, and he said, "We got a heart for you." So I stopped what I was doing, jumped in the car, and drove 4.5 hours to Kansas City, and just left her standing there.
Was she waiting for you when you got back?
She actually did come to Kansas City 2 weeks after my transplant, when I was already out of KU Med and at the Friendship Inn, which is where I did most of my recovery, just because we had to stay close to Kansas City for a month, and we were going to make the drive every day. But yeah, she came to visit me there and is still hanging around. So.
Oh, I like that. I like that. Yeah, I think that might go down as like a good first date story. One for the books, for sure.
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
Christina,
it is one for the books.
It is. Christina, you mentioned that the road to recovery for you, not only slow, it was simply downright scary. How long, remind us, how long you were in the hospital?
I was in there a total of 53 days.
And on an ECMO machine, basically a form of life support. Dr. Shaw, why would Christina need an ECMO? And do all transplant recipients, are they in danger of needing one, or was this a special case?
Well, sometimes what happens after a heart transplant is that you can get a condition called primary graft dysfunction. When we're doing a heart transplant, we're taking a heart and transporting it to KU Med and then placing it into a recipient who has already heart failure. Mm-hmm. So that heart is going through some, obviously, time of away from the body, away from getting blood flow. There's an ischemic time there. And sometimes what happens is those hearts, when we implant them, sometimes they do take a little bit of time to wake back up. And so what ECMO allows is continuous blood flow. It's a form of cardiopulmonary bypass, and that allows the heart to rest and for it to wake up if those hearts don't pick up right away. This condition, is not common in heart transplant patients. Severe primary graft dysfunction is what Christina had. That's around 8 to 10%, looking at some statistics. And so, not an outcome that we want, but it does happen, and we need to be vigilant about it and support the heart. And then over time, these hearts do come back, as it was the case for Christina. It does lead to a longer hospital stay, but the hearts do come back and they work normally. They just need that little bit of time to kind of get it to work again.
So Christina, what's it like to be back? Just back at life, certainly back to work.
Amazing. I got transplanted right in the middle of COVID, and it was, that was a struggle in itself. So I had to work at home for a while, for about 8 months when I first got home, to kind of be secluded away from everyone. And I have a really great company that made it easy for me to come and kind of be secluded in my own area, but still feel like I was still a part of the team. And that's been awesome.
Yeah, I bet they loved supporting you. We saw that celebration of your donor. I'm sure it's been like a family, coming back to your family. So that's fantastic. And then Corey, of course, hunting, a big part of your life as always. What's it like getting back out there?
Oh, I love being outside. Yeah, it's hard when you think about your life being taken away from you because of a disease that you can't control. But when you get a chance to get back out and you're in your element, there's nothing like it. My church is outside.
I love that. And I know you get emotional thinking about this, Corey. I know you're big and burly and rough and gruff, and we love that about you. But I know that this has been it's almost like a rebirth in so many ways for you, as we've talked over the years. I want to ask you both if you have reached out to your donor family, your donor's family. There's a process that you have to go through Midwest Transplant Network by contacting the organ donor's family. But have either of you tried or plan to try?
Yes, I have sent a letter and did not receive a response, which is okay. I can't imagine how that would be to receive a letter from the person that received your loved one's organs. So at first I was upset that they didn't respond, but you have to respect that they went through something way more traumatic to lose that person than what I did. So
yeah, and it's still pretty new. I mean, I think continuing with the letters is important. And Dr. Shaw, you know how this goes. I mean, you see it on both sides, and I guess it's important to make sure Christina doesn't give up on the hope that she'll be reconnected at some point, right?
Yeah, no, I hope so. I think, like Corey mentioned in the beginning, where in order for this to happen, something tragic does have to happen, and I think they both have I think a great insight on that, and I think they're both grateful. They're great stewards of the gift they've received, and I'm glad that they're living their life to what they want to do with the gift.
Yeah, it just takes a little time. So Corey, I want to ask you, what would your message be to your heart donors family?
First and foremost, thank you. Would be the first thing I'd try to express. I wrote a letter, and it went right at the peak of the onset of the pandemic here in March of 2020. You have to wait a year before you can write your letter, so I sent it then. And I don't know if that had something to do with not generating a response or not. There's another one sitting here on my laptop that just needs printed off and sent in. I've been working on that the past couple of years, and your thought process changes as you go longer post-transplant. I mean, it's very emotional in the beginning, and then once you start living your life and your life becomes your own again, different questions and different things come up that you think about. So my second letter is obviously a lot different than the first one.
Yeah, that makes sense. Things change and time changes and your perspective changes. If you have any questions for Corey or Christina or Dr. Shaw, you can send those in to us on YouTube, Facebook, and the Medical News Network. You can find links to all of those right there on your screen. But let's get our COVID count this morning from Dr. Dana Hawkinson, Medical Director of Infection Prevention and Control. Good morning.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good.
Good.
Yeah, right now our numbers, active numbers have jumped up a little bit. Total numbers, 60 cases of COVID in the hospital. Of those, 36 are active, 4 in the ICU. Unfortunately, the majority, 3 of those are on the ventilator, so quite sick.
Dr. Hawkinson, several headlines about norovirus. I'm going to ask you about. Headlines are say that cases and outbreaks are on the rise. And while that is true, the CDC points out that norovirus levels were lower during the height of the pandemic and are actually just getting back to normal.
I think that's it, and we've seen this with other diseases as well, where we think it's an increase, but we are kind of just getting back to a normal, steady state after those year, 2 years of such good public health, non-pharmaceutical interventions. You know, what we're talking about is distancing, masking, but of course, hand hygiene, which is so vitally important. So what we are seeing now is kind of, I think, unfortunately, just getting back to that steady state and just understanding that norovirus is out there. In fact, I saw one stat in one of the infectious disease groups that said annually 1 in 15 people will get norovirus infection. So it is quite prevalent most of the time in our everyday lives.
However, is it true that hand sanitizer doesn't kill norovirus as well as, we think of just washing our hands when it comes to coronavirus, but not so much with norovirus?
Yeah, the alcohol hand sanitizer doesn't work well. The best prevention is soap and water, and especially if you do have any soiled hands or visible soil or particulate matter on your hands. Hand washing with soap and water is the best, at least 20 seconds. But also, if you are disinfecting and cleaning, most cleaners that you can buy at the store are approved to kill norovirus. If you are concerned, there should be a label there that you can look up for EPA approved norovirus or Norwalk-like virus activity. But most of those are pretty good if you are buying those cleaners at the store, and you can use them in your household to disinfect and clean.
All right. Do we have any reporters on the line today? Let's get to our community questions. By the way, Corey and Christina, Ann says that your stories, both of your stories, are very inspiring. So again, thank you so much for sharing those. Jerry wants to know what it was like when they told you you would need a transplant. He asked if you had any hesitations. I think we've heard from both of you, no hesitations whatsoever at the time you got the calls. But when they told you needed a transplant, was that scary, Corey?
Not in the least. And they had told me about, I had almost 15 years to prepare for this, because they told me initially when I first diagnosed in 2005 that, I was on the road to a transplant. I was going to need one, to keep going. It was a welcome blessing after 11 months on that LVAD. And I felt amazing, once I got it, but I also felt way better with that LVAD 11 months in than I did 1 month in, or 1 week in, or 1 day in. But it did make it better. And without that device, I never would have been able to recover as fast post-transplant, because my body wouldn't have been in that good a shape to accept the transplant. So
sure. And Christina, you had a little bit more time to prepare, because again, you're about 6 months behind Corey, so you knew what he was going through, you knew it was coming for you. Just any concerns, or were you ready?
I was ready. I was definitely ready. I knew that I could probably overcome anything after being sick on the LVAD at first. Like Corey said, it definitely helped compared to where we were before we got the LVAD. So it was a welcomed thing for me to get the call for the transplant, and knowing that, it may be a long road, but I was going to be back to what I was, 15, 20 years ago. And that was exciting for me.
Yeah, that's enough. That's fantastic. Jen wants to know, what criteria should I be asking myself, Dr. Shaw, when it comes to whether or not I need genetic testing or my kids need genetic testing? Is it if I have a heart problem, or is there any other criteria?
Yeah, I think for me, the threshold for genetic testing for me has now become very low, because we know that so many conditions have a genetic underpinning to them. And so what I would say is, if you have a family member that has been affected with heart disease, especially heart failure, of a non-ischemic etiology, not related to coronary artery disease or heart attacks, that family member would be encouraged to get genetic testing. And if the disease, if there is genetic positivity there, then you can use that to screen other family members.
Okay, last question from Martha. Corey, I'll start with you. What's the one thing you no longer take for granted now that you have this second chance?
I would say I'm a lot more willing to do things for people, just because, just not wasting time. And if you see somebody that needs help, you help them out.
Yeah, I think when I was watching your interview before, you had said something, just something as simple as holding the door for someone just matters. Just that any little thing you can do to reach and connect with another human being. That's fantastic. And then Christina, what's the one thing that you no longer take for granted that maybe you had before?
I guess just the small things. You don't really think about those things. You're so busy doing your everyday life that you don't ever just take time, slow down, and appreciate the small things. Things that some people, unfortunately, don't get to experience anymore.
Yeah, we're all guilty of that. We need to slow it down. I want to get final thoughts from our guests, and I'm going to start with Dr. Shaw. Just your final thoughts today.
Yeah, I think what I would like to say is that both Christina and Corey obviously are fighters. They've been dealing with this disease for many years, and it's not easy to go through 2 major heart surgeries, the LVAD and then a heart transplant. You know, not everyone can do it, and not everyone can have a great outcome now at this point, like these two have. And I think a lot of it speaks to them, and it speaks to their, willingness and trying to, overcome this heart disease. And so a lot of credit goes to both of them. And I think a lot of the success, could be the fact that they have that sibling connection. They both have seen that. They both can be a support network for each other. And I think that's obviously helped.
Nothing better than cheering each other on in a situation like this.
Yes.
They had each other, true siblings. So I want to get your final thoughts, Christina.
I guess my overall thoughts would be, if you are experiencing some kind of different feelings as far as your health goes, don't wait. Don't think it's going to get better. Seek that help. I mean, it was a long road to get to where I am now, but it was so worth all the fighting and all of the struggles that I went through that don't wait.
Great advice, Christina. Thank you. Okay, Corey, you say it like it is. Final thoughts.
I will reiterate that. Yeah, the best advocate for your medical health is you, and it has to be you. So if you don't like what you're hearing from the doctor or whatever's not working, don't let somebody tell you you have allergies when you have a debilitating heart condition, because there's 2 very different treatments there, and that doesn't pan out. It just makes makes the struggle harder and makes the problem worse. So yeah, find someone that is an advocate for you, and the doctors at KU Med have been fantastic through this, from start to finish.
Thank you so much, both of you. Again, can't show our appreciation enough for you sharing your stories and being so open with us. So thank you for that. Dr. Hawkinson, final thoughts.
Yeah, I think Corey's point is quite poignant, and certainly it is very important. If you have something going on and you're given one diagnosis, see how that goes. If you're given treatment, it doesn't help, keep exploring and looking for that final diagnosis, because it may be something more important, is what we have seen with our guests today. So that is very important. You know your body best. Keep talking with your medical teams, and if you need to, keep investigating what really is going on. Is it allergies, or is it something more severe like the heart issue? But this includes just a number of different things for a lot of people that they're dealing with on a long-term basis as well. And overall, I think this is a good segment today that we had on norovirus to continue to endorse those non-pharmaceutical interventions, especially, washing your hands with soap and water is vitally important. If you're going out in public, whether it's to worship or to the grocery store or to the gym, please, washing your hands before you go there, washing your hands right when you leave. It's all important to help keep you safe, and those things do work.
Thank you to all of our guests today, and thank you for being with us. Have a great day, and we'll see you back here tomorrow at 8. Every minute matters when you have a stroke. New research could change how doctors react in those critical moments. I'm Jessica Lovell on the next Open Mics with Dr. Stites. We highlight brand new research on Show Me the Science, focused on better outcomes in some of the worst strokes. Hear directly from a survivor Wednesday at 8.
Subscribe to our morning medical update and open mics with Dr. Stites podcast. Now, everywhere podcasts are available.